principle is internal stance shapes visible action. And I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but when you do have a story that you tell yourself in your head, it actually will shape how you communicate it verbally, the tone, and also in your body language. And according to statistics, 7% of communication is words, 38% is tonality, and 55% is body language. So whatever you're thinking is also being communicated by your physiology. And so you really need to watch yourself when you're in a conflictual situation. You have to take that self-awareness and say to yourself, okay, so what's my body and my voice communicating right now? Because we can all train ourselves to say the right words, but it's more about what's going on inside my head is probably being communicated by my body and my tone. And so it's important for you to actually maybe tell yourself a different story so that you can actually communicate something different with your body and with your tone. So remembering that, that internal stance shapes visible action is really important. The second principle is fuzzy goals equals fuzzy outcomes. Now this may seem ironic to you, but a lot of people go into conflict and they haven't really decided what their goal is in the conflict or what's the outcome they want. They just kind of, it happens and the conflict starts and they haven't really thought it through. So this refers to what do you want to happen and what don't you want to happen? I mean, you could win the battle but lose the war. And what I mean is you could be right, but you could also lose the relationship. And maybe that's a key relationship for you getting things done in your organization. So you really need to step back for a minute and think, what do I want out of this interaction? What is the outcome I want? And is this the way to go about it? The third principle is emotions trump logic. Now, I realize in business we're not supposed to get emotional. However, we are human beings, and you can either control your emotions or they can control you. But you are going to get emotional, and it's a matter of how you handle it in a business context. So that's where sometimes avoiding can be smart. Like if you start to get emotional, as you might have noticed, as the emotions go up, the logic goes down. So sometimes it's appropriate to take a break and say, you know, I need to think about this. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Or I need to take a walk. I mean, part of it's just being honest with yourself and saying to yourself, I'm starting to get angry about this, or I'm starting to get really frustrated, and step back from it. And sometimes the best way to do that in a conflictual situation is just to say, I'm feeling very frustrated right now. I'd like to take a break and come back to it when I'm not feeling so frustrated. And then come back to it when you can. So just remembering, either have your emotions or your emotions will have you. The fourth principle is we are hardwired to jump to conclusions. This is a very tough one because the reason we're hardwired to jump to conclusions is because we have these experiences and we tend to repeat them in our head. Often we do this with the people we're married to. It's like you've seen a behavior and then you say to yourself, I've seen this before. And maybe it's not what you think it is, but you jump to conclusions. So one of the things that people need to do is, once again, inquiry is a fabulous skill to have, is you hear somebody say something and you think you're a mind reader and you think you know what they're thinking, and instead you need to step back and say, am I making an assumption here? And do I need to ask the question? It's as simple as saying, so why did you say that? Or what's your thinking on this? To be curious about where other people are coming from and not assume that you know. Because oftentimes we assign intentions to people that they don't necessarily have. So to understand that all of us are hardwired to jump to conclusions and to use good inquiry and asking questions, and also good advocacy to basically talk about, make your reasoning very clear. So the inquiry model here really helps. you not jump to conclusions, because you're listening to fully understand the other person's point of view and assumptions. You're asking questions to clarify and not influence. A question to clarify would be, so tell me more about your reasoning about this, versus don't you think it would be better if we did this? Also, to acknowledge the person's thoughts and feelings helps them go deeper into it, and also to reflect on the other person's comments. So when you're in inquiry, it's all about the other person and not about you. Now, advocacy, in terms of hardwiring for jumping to conclusions, helps other people see into your thinking. So it would be where you not just tell your opinion, but you also openly share your assumptions, your data, your conclusions. You make your own reasoning explicit. You would call for people to explore your views, which could sound like, what do you think of what I've just said? Or do you see any gaps in my logic? Where you literally ask people to critique your thinking. And then you would build on comments made by the other people to include their thinking into your thinking. Now, you obviously need to balance both inquiry and advocacy. However, I will always say, when in doubt, inquire first and then advocate. Because once you've listened to somebody, they're much more open to listening to you as well. The fifth principle is what you're not saying may be the real conversation. Now, you know we all have conversations in our head, and we edit them heavily, which is a good thing. But sometimes in those conversations are actually things that we need to express to the other person. So I'll give you an example. So I've sent an email to somebody 5 times, they haven't gotten back to me. And in my head I'm thinking, oh, you're such an undependable liar, you know, and this is so frustrating for me because I can't finish the project because you haven't gotten back to me. Now, obviously I want to keep my judgments and labels out of the conversation. But what I could say that would be productive is, I've emailed you 5 times and I haven't heard from you. And the impact that that's having on me is I can't finish the project. Can we talk about this? Because people don't know what's in your head, and you can productively bring it out to get your problem solved. But the key to this is you can't have any judgments or labels. You need to just pretty much talk about the issue and then find out what you can do to fix it. So what you're not saying may be the real conversation. And this is an exercise in self-awareness where you can kind of examine those thoughts you're having and ask yourself, is there something I can bring into the conversation that will help me fix the problem? Because if people don't know what the problem is, then there's a very low likelihood that it will be fixed. The sixth principle is we know others' impact on us, but not their intention. Now, we all sometimes feel like we are pretty good mind readers, but the truth is we're not. And it's not actually productive to assume bad intent, because really everybody does usually have a good intention. So if you don't know somebody's intention, you can actually ask them, what's your intention here? But what's even better is to explain the impact of their actions on you. And you can always say, I don't know what your intention is here, but the impact that you're having on me is I can't finish my work on time if you don't get back to my email requests. So I'd really appreciate it if you could get back to me on time. So that's up to us to explain to people their impacts, because they may not be thinking about it and they may not know what their impact is on us. The seventh principle is it takes 2 to tango. And what that refers to is oftentimes it's so much easier to point out there than to look in here. And oftentimes we're doing something to contribute to the problem and we don't even know it. And so sometimes it's a really positive thing to ask somebody, is there anything that I'm doing that's making this more difficult? Or do you have any feedback for me on my performance? Because it does take 2 to tango. And it's usually a co-creative process, you know, in terms of conflict. That there's usually something that they're doing, there's usually something that you're doing. And so it takes a big person to say, please give me some feedback. And usually what's very interesting is if you ask for feedback, then sometimes the other person will model you and ask for feedback. Will it happen 100% of the time? No. But, you know, you've got a much better shot of having them ask you to give them feedback if you ask them for some feedback first, and also to assume your contribution shows you're taking responsibility, and it also models the behavior for them as well.